بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Jazakumullah khairan for coming out today. It's nice to see a bigger crowd. I know Sunday was a makeup class, and this coming Sunday will be another makeup class. Just keep that in mind. We will finish our Tafseer class a week earlier than most of your other Sharia classes because I'm traveling, and that's why we're doing a couple Sundays. The 19th, inshallah, I believe is going to be our, yes, the 19th will be our last day. Okay, inshallah? Just to keep you up to par with the schedule. Inshallah, we will continue our study of Surah Yusuf's story and the lessons that we learned from him. I think maybe the section that we're going to do today is my favorite section. I love to kind of reflect on Sayyidina Yusuf salam's, how he carries himself. Again, the key concept, the word that we're going to hear over and over is the way he carries himself with ihsan inside the jail. Inshallah is what we're going to cover today. So as usual, we're going to start by reading the ayat so we can hear them. We can hear the beauty of the, mashallah, the Arabic language, inshallah, and get ourselves in kind of the mood and the mindset to start reflecting and doing tafsir on the ayat. So inshallah, we're going to start at ayah 33. To start from the beginning, we're going to go from ayah 33 to 53 approximately. Inshallah, we will do whoever has a turn to read will read 3 ayats each. Okay? Until we finish. So inshallah, today I will start here on the brother's side. Who wants to read first from the brother's side? We're going to start with قال ربي from this ayah, the top of ayah 33. Who's going to start over here? You need to volunteer yourself. Don't volunteer your neighbor. Go ahead.
فاستجاب له ربه فصرف عنه كيدهن إنه هو السميع العليم ثم بدا لهم بعد ما رأوا الآيات ليسجننه حتى
Go ahead. Somebody read over here. Brothers?
صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار لا تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن الحكم إلا لله أمر ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون يا صاحبي السجن أما أحدهما فيسقي ربه خمرا وأما الآخر فيصلب فتأكل الطير من رأسه قضي الأمر الذي فيه تستفتيان
Girls.
وقال للذي ظن أنه ناج منه اذكرني عند ربك فأنساه الشيطان ذكر ربه فلبث في السجن بضع سنين وقال الملك إني أرى 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخر يابسات يا أيها الملأ أفتوني في رؤياي إن كنتم بالرؤيا تعبرون قالوا أضغاث أحلام وما نحن بتأويل الأحلام بعالمين
وقال الذي نجا منهما واستكبر بعد يوسف أيها الصديق أسلم قال فرعون 7 سنين دأبا فما قصرتم فلم تجدوا إلا قليلا ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك زمان شتاء يأكل ما قدمتم لهن إلا قليلا مما تحسنون ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك عام فيه يغاث الناس والذكر يعصرون وقال الملك ائتوني به فلما جاء أمر الرسول قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة التي قطعن أيديهن إن ربي بكيدهن عليم.
Last person to read on the other side. The last 3 ayat. Go ahead. I know that last ayah is the next juz, but it is the continuation of the statement of the wife of the Aziz. So I just wanted to finish it. Jazakumullah khairan, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, I hope everybody enjoyed that tilawah, mashallah. May Allah accept from all of you those who read and those of you who follow in your masahif or in your phones. Inshallah, you get just as much reward, inshallah. So today, inshallah, we talk about the next phase of Prophet Yusuf's life. And what's very interesting about Prophet Yusuf's life is these different kind of environments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places him in. And subhanAllah, and the story teaches us that over and over he is described as a muhsin, somebody who has ihsan. And I know I used this word last time a lot, and this week we'll use it again, because this is exactly the person who has that ihsan, who does things to the best of their ability, who worships Allah as if he sees him, but although he does not see Allah or she does not see Allah, verily Allah sees them, right? That's how Prophet Muhammad translated ihsan or described ihsan. Prophet Yusuf was always aware of that. He was always in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and aware of Allah's presence. And regardless of the environment, his first part of his childhood, he was in the Bedouin, with his family, with the tribes, in the tents, in that kind of lifestyle. The second part of his life, he's in, like we talked about last time, a very luxurious lifestyle, right? In the mansion of the Aziz, the prime minister of the king and his wife, and the elite part of a whole different country and nation and language and culture in Egypt, right? And now this is the third phase of his life in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes him into another test. And that is the test of being in the jail. And we started the ayat in which subhanAllah's Prophet Yusuf, he asked Allah, and it's just a little bit of the review of last time's 2 ayat. He asked Allah, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being in jail is better for me than being in the situation that I'm in. Although he was pampered, although he was living in a luxurious lifestyle, although he was getting all these attention from all these women, and he could have chosen any type of life and any pleasure and any, done whatever he had, nobody to judge him. And this type of lifestyle was unacceptable to him, right? We said that last time. His goal and his hope and his dream and his hadaf, his purpose was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, and the attainment of what his purpose was is that he was a prophet, right? And so he asks for jail. He says, jail is better for me than this, in this situation. And Allah says, and so why Allah, فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers his dua. And then last time you guys asked me, so why did he go to jail for? The next ayah actually says why he goes to jail. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in the minds of the men, the Aziz and his friends, the men of the husbands of these women that are trying to seduce Yusuf and things like that, that maybe we need to get him out, we need to get him behind bars, like we need to get him out of this, the situation is getting out of hand, basically. So the next ayah tells us that the men in that society or in that space, they decided to find a way to get Yusuf in jail. And although we know that Yusuf is innocent, he never does anything wrong. He never does anything that is not dignified or pure and clean. Because they are of the elite, because they are ministers and prime ministers, and they know the king of Egypt, they can get Yusuf in jail, which is even until today. If people are sometimes thrown in jail and they're innocent, right? Because the right people have the reins and the power. So subhanAllah, so Yusuf finds himself in jail, and he realized that this is the answer of the dua, and this is better for him. But what does Yusuf do, subhanAllah, in the jail, right? There are some people who might think of, what do you think if you found yourself in this prison? First of all, what kind of people are in jail? Let's talk about this new environment. What kind of people are in jail? Go ahead. People, criminals, right? People do bad things. So there's murderers, there's robbers, there's, the worst type of society in general, unless the few who are innocent like Yusuf, the worst type of people are in jail, right? He's with, what kind of character do those people have? What kind of akhlaq usually? Bad manners. They've got bad manners. Maybe they're foul. The way they speak is very foul. The way they carry themselves, they're not very dignified. They're not well mannered at all, right? Jail is a difficult place to be. We know that today, even in modern, Western American jails, it's a bad place to be. It's violent. You're always worried about getting hurt. You're always getting, some sort of fight with somebody. The situation is not easy. But subhanAllah, Yusuf finds himself in the jail with these kind of people. And one of the first ayat in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Yusuf in the jail, what does he say? What does he say? What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about him? Or what do the people in jail say about him? What does that mean about Yusuf? He continued to carry himself with his character. He doesn't become violent like those around him. He doesn't become foul like those around him. He doesn't take on their characteristics. He maintains who he is as Yusuf alayhi salam. What he's been taught to be, what he knows he is, the akhlaq and the character that he has, which is very difficult. We talked about the difficulty of him carrying those akhlaq in the fitna of the house of the Aziz and his wife, and now this is a different type of test. And so people say, we see you as a muhsin. We see you're different than us. The way you talk to others, the way you carry yourself, the way you act, maybe even the type of ibadah that he did. Those around him sense that he is good, right? And so sometimes your character is all that matters. He hasn't done any dawah yet. He hasn't said to them, believe in one God. We will talk about, he does actually do this in the next ayat, but all they see of him now is his character. So the first thing we learn about from Yusuf in this part of his life is what? Right? How you carry yourself is of utmost importance. It's not necessarily what you say or how you defend yourself or, or how much knowledge you may have and you show as if you're somebody who's very religious or whatever. It's how you carry yourself with your character and how you carry yourself in the different spaces that you're in your high schools, in your colleges, in your jobs of employment, in your places of employment. We want people to say, there is something special about Sadi. I don't know what it is, but she carries herself. These Muslims, because each one of you, and it is a huge responsibility. Sometimes it's a burden that we carry, that we are carrying the responsibility of our ummah. How you act and how you, if you cheat on your exams and your teachers find out, they say, oh, look at what these Muslims do. They don't say, look at what this one person does. If you are always getting angry and being obnoxious and bothering your colleagues at work, they say, look, this is how these Muslims are, right? So we carry that load on our shoulders if we like it or we don't. We represent La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And this is exactly what Yusuf did in jail. He represented who he was as a believer in one God and a worshiper of one God. And people could tell that about him. He was different than the other criminals. And so we learned, this is something beautiful to take from Yusuf in our lives. And so when we find ourselves in difficult situations, in places that we're not comfortable, or sometimes people just trigger us so much that the bad side of us is coming out, we practice say, can I be from the muhsinin like Yusuf? Can I keep myself with character and grace and dignity, because that is who I am as a Muslim and as a mu'min and as a muhsin, inshallah, is my goal. And the environment around me will not change me, right? So the jail did not change Yusuf. So his cellmates come and say to him, because we see you from the good people, we're having these continuous dreams. Is there anything about you? Can you help us with this? This is where we kind of come back to the concept of dreams in the story of Sayyidina Yusuf. The very first dream was his dream at the very beginning of the surah, right? What was his dream again? The stars and the sun and the moon prostrating to him. Did he know what that meant? No, he asked his father, right? And his father explained to him that this means one day you will be something great, and though there are people who will follow you, and you will be an important part of this community. You will have respect and honor, or something, like this. However, now Yusuf alayhi salam is actually interpreting dreams. So we know that somewhere in these years, about 50, let's say 20 years plus or minus, it hasn't been quite 20 years yet, 10 of them being with 10 or plus or minus in the house of the Aziz, and then a few more years now in the jail, right? He learned to interpret dreams. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him that ilm. And Allah mentions in the ayat before that we gave him ilm, and we gave him, this is the type of ilm that Allah gave him, the knowledge to interpret. So now he's interpreting dreams. So what were the 2 dreams that we read about in these ayats? What were the dreams of his cellmates? Sadiq. Mm-hmm.
So one of them said, I dreamt that I was pressing one, and the other one said, I dreamt that I was very red on my head, of which birds were eating.
Okay, good. So one of them says, I dreamt that I was pressing wine. Okay. And the other one is carrying bread on his head that the birds are eating from. What does Yusuf do at this point? Yes, he takes. But what does he say to them first? Perfect. So he stalls, right? He stalls. He says to them, I'm going to tell you what your dreams mean, right? Before your next meal comes. But the first thing he says is, this ability of mine is not from me. It's not like I have, I'm some sort of magician or soothsayer or dream, This is an ilm from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now he starts actually being a da'i. So the first part of us seeing Sayyidina Yusuf as a da'i, as somebody who calls to la ilaha illallah, to one God, is in jail. So the idea that regardless of the place that you're in, you can always find a way to call people to the one true faith. Even in the jail, even in the worst kind of schools that you may be in, even in the worst situations. He was able to find a way to call to Islam regardless of the situation that he was in. With people that you think, oh, these people need to be written off. These are the worst criminals. No, he never wrote anybody off. So do not write off those who you think are not necessarily ever going to be believers. Do not think that you can never trigger something in their mind, in their heart. Maybe they're not going to become believers in front of you. Maybe many, you will never know that one day they say la ilaha illallah. Maybe they say the shahada. But you started that. You ignited something now at this young age because you told them something. Do not ever write off people because they're too bad, and do not ever think that this situation how can I make da'wah here? You can make da'wah, and you can call people, and you can remind people in any situation. Yusuf took the situation of being in jail to call criminals. And he says to them, I will give you the interpretation of your dream, but first I want to tell you that this ability of mine is from Allah, right? It's from my Creator. And then he starts telling them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He says, I came to a people who just believed in God. They worship. I come from, but my father and my forefather were believers in one God. He starts telling them about his religion. And he says to them, how does he call them? He says, Ya sahibay sijn. Oh, my companions, or oh, my friends in jail. How is that? What does that sound like to you? How is Yusuf addressing those around him? It's equals, like he's one of them. He's not better than them. They are his friends. They're the people that he shares his cell with, the people that he eats with. He makes them feel that we are in the same space together. We're friends. We're companions, and I'm bringing awareness to you about something, right? And this is how you make da'wah. You can never ask people or remind people of the faith, making them feel that you're offending their religion or making fun of what they believe in, or that you think that you're better than them, or you say, this is a very problem that we go through in our communities, that we say, oh, these kuffar, No, these are our neighbors that are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us here for a purpose. Because these people can one day actually be better believers than us, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written it for them. And so never look down on those you are calling to the faith. And you know, even he must have learned that, Allahu A'lam, from his father, because maybe his father had told about his grandfather. You know, Sayyidina Ibrahim, when he called his father, he says, Ya Abati, oh my father, in a kind and loving way. All the prophets, they spoke, and they would say, this is my nation. Prophet Lut, he had the worst of nations. Prophet Noah, his people drove him crazy for 950 years. But he says, they used to say, oh my people, oh my people. And they would show care and concern and love and humility and equality. And we are one, we're in this together, to the people who were disbelieving in them, right? And so this is exactly another thing that we learn from Yusuf, that you make those who you're calling to your faith, and you actually believe it. You don't, that we are all human. We are all the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we all have the right to be called to this faith and to find this faith. And so this is how beautifully Yusuf speaks to his mates, his cellmates. He says to them, "Oh, my companions in this jail," right? He says to them that I come from a faith of the prophets of God. That this is basically, I'm not making this up. It's not like this is something that has lineage. So when you talk, or it has basis, it's rooted in something greater. So when you tell people about Islam, make sure you make them realize that this faith is not just the followers of Muhammad. No, Muhammad was in the lineage of Moses and Jesus and Noah and Abraham, and all this faith is from the Abrahamic faiths, and that is rooted in the same, comes from the same source. So he tells the cellmates, we learn from Yusuf, that let people know that your faith is rooted in these monotheistic faiths. Let people know that there is only one God. So the first thing he tells them is about his lineage of his father and his grandfather, and then he tells them that there's only one God, right? One God. He tells them that this God is the only one worthy of your worship, right? You should not be worshiping anything else. He tells them that people must submit to the rules and laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you believe in this one God, this is the only God worthy of your worship, then you have to accept that this God is going to tell you what's right and wrong. This God is going to find good and bad, right? This God is going to tell us how to live our lives. That's what we're submitting to. So this is what Yusuf tells them. These are, if you read that, when you go home and you review ayat, these are the basics that he teaches them, right? He tells them that also, that there is certainly a day of judgment. He says all before he interprets their dreams. He tells them that there is a day of judgment. Each and every one of us will face our Creator, will face that one God, and will be questioned for our actions and what we did, and the things that we said, and the actions that we took. All of these things we will be responsible for, each of us individually. These are the core messages of every single prophet, right? So when you call people to Islam, the first thing you're not going to talk about is not why we don't eat pork or drink alcohol. The first thing you're going to talk about is not why we have to wear hijab, or, you know, these are things that are not, our core is our tawheed and our belief in one God worthy of our worship. He defines good and bad for us, and to him we will return and be questioned. Right? Even if people come and ask you about Islam and ask, you know, why are you guys not allowed to do this? And why do you guys have to pray 5 times a day? And why have to take them all, even when they ask you about hijab rules, take them back to, it's because I believe in one God. And you always bring your discussion with people about faith back to tawheed. Because this is the core message of every single prophet. Every single prophet, if you go to the Quran, one God, only one worthy of our worship. He defines for us how to live our life, and there is certainly a day of judgment. Now, different prophets, maybe they prayed differently. The way Nuh prayed is different than, or the way Isa prayed is different than, for example, the 5 prayers of Muhammad and our ummah. The fact that we fast in Ramadan is different than how the Bani Israel were taught to fast by Musa. We go for Hajj. The nations before us, for example, did not have Hajj. Our fiqh is different, but our core is the same. Every single prophet had the same message. That is the message that we have to carry to the next. And when that enters people's hearts, when that entered into the hearts of the ummah of Muhammad, after 13 years in Mecca, Then when he told them no more alcohol, they threw it in the streets. There was rivers of wine. Then when he told the ladies, cover yourself, in minutes, they had found things to cover themselves, right? So when that concept of one God, the one that we will be responsible to be asked about our actions in front of, is ingrained in the hearts, all of these other things, sami'na wa ata'na, they come easy. We hear and we obey, right? What we do a lot is when we're raising, even if some of you are teachers in camp or Sunday schools, or you're teaching new people about Islam, you have a friend that just became a new Muslim, you start from these details that, these details will come eventually, as long as they really have grasped in their heart these basic concepts that every single prophet called to. 4 things, always remember. One God, the only one we should worship, the only one that defines good and bad, right and wrong, the laws of how we carry ourselves. This is very important in the modern times that we live in, right? Because now people are questioning things that are just out of mind-boggling. That's a different discussion. But one God that defines what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, our Creator, and that we will return to Him. For sure, there's a day that we will be responsible for our actions, and there's a day of judgment, and there's a final abode, an eternity of either heaven or hell. Right? So Yusuf tells all of these things to his companions in prison. He tells all of these things to them. And then in another way, now we're learning from Yusuf in the prison, tactics or ways of making da'wah. Another way of making da'wah is he asks questions to them. Or what does he ask them? Yeah, he says, do you guys think that more than one God is better than one God? Don't those gods, aren't they gonna argue, or another method of da'wah is to ask people in a good way. He says, oh, my friends in jail, do you think this is better than this? What do you think about this? Doesn't this make more sense to you? Right? And you get into this discussion with people, and you trigger their intellect and their logic to lead them and let themselves lead themselves to the belief in one God. Right? And so this is another thing that we learned from Yusuf. Having discussions by asking questions, not necessarily making people feel like I have all the answers for you. This is the way it is. But let's think about this. Does this make sense? Is this better or this better? And so this is another thing that we learned from Yusuf in his da'wah in the jail with his cellmates. After he goes through this discussion with all of them, then he tells them that the meaning of their dreams. What is the meaning of their dreams? Go ahead.
So he addresses them that they are talking to the surgeon, and then he says, as for one of you, you will be serving the king, and the servants, and as for the other one, you will be executed.
Perfect. So he tells them that this is the meaning of one of you will survive. You're actually going to get out of this jail. You're going to finish your time in jail, and you're actually going to get to serve in the king's court and be a servant of this king and serve him the wine that you saw in your dream. And the other one of you that sees birds eating from your head, that's because basically you're going to be like crucified and killed and left to the vultures or whatever it is, right? So he tells them this is the meaning of your dream. And then he says to the one that will survive, what does he tell him? Yes. When you get out, because you're going to get out, mention me to the king, because I need to get out too. I'm here, I'm innocent, I don't want to stay here much longer, right? So when you get out and you're serving the wine at some point, remember to mention to the king that there is a man that I know, he was my cellmate, a very good man, and he doesn't deserve to be in jail, and let's look over his case, basically, right? So what happens then? Yes. So what happens is the man that actually makes it out of the sijn, the one that makes it out of the jail and gets to serve the wine and gets to live, he must have gotten really into this new position of his, and he gets to be in the king's court, and he's serving drinks in their events, and he forgets about his friend that was with him in the jail. He forgets, and the Quran says that the shaitan made him forget. And so Yusuf says bid'a sinin means a few more years. Bid'a, usually the Mufassirin will say equals something between 3 and 9. Like it's more than 2. So we don't know exactly, and he stayed a few more years in jail. And there's no kind of grasp of what Yusuf does but we are sure that Yusuf maintains his dawah. He gets to more people that he gets to know in jail. He carries himself with the same ihsan that he always has, and he carries himself with sabr. He's very patient. He's very patient. And how do we know about his patience? How does he address his friend when he comes back? So we'll keep that kind of question hanging, because what happens actually is eventually, his friend that got out of jail, his cellmate, is serving wine, whatever, and then he hears that the king is having a dream. This is the third dream in this surah, right? The king himself is starting to have this dream that happens. The Mufassirin says the king has this dream over and over, like it becomes annoying to him. It becomes just every time, many nights he sleeps and he has the same dream. Right? And he gets overwhelmed by it and anxious by it, and he needs to find out what it means. What is that dream of the king? Go. Good. So the king is one time with all his ministers and his chiefs in his court, and he tells them, I've been having this dream over and over. I need somebody to explain it to me. And the man that got out of jail is serving wine at that time or doing his thing in the court, and he hears the dream and he says, I will find out for you what it means. I know somebody who can interpret dreams. Right? The king's dream is that he sees 7 skinny cows, really malnourished cows eating the other ones, right? Big, healthy cows. And he sees 7 years of grain that are very green and lush and beautiful growth, harvest, and 7 that are withered and dying and look like they didn't get enough water and they have no benefit to them, right? He sees this dream over and over. So this cellmate says, I know somebody who can interpret the dream for you, and he goes back to Yusuf. And he says to him, he remembers this at that point, and he goes back to the jail, and he says to him, the king is having this dream, we need your help. What does Yusuf do at that time, at that point? What would you do? Or what do you think a normal person would do? Huh? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're just stretching? Okay, what are you saying? What does that mean? Okay, bribery. Yeah, he was hoping to get out of jail. He does get out of jail, but what would be your first reaction? You'd be mad, right? You forgot about me. I told you to remember me to the king. I had to sit around here in jail for so many more, and now you're asking me for help. So the first reaction would be, why are you asking me for help? After you forgot about me. But Yusuf is who said that? A muhsin. Yusuf is a muhsin. He doesn't react like this. Yusuf understands from this dream right away that there is a greater problem that's going to face this land, right? That there's going to be years of drought that will come in which people are going to go hungry and die, and it's going to be very difficult years. And my responsibility is to make sure that this doesn't happen. This is the epitome of ihsan. These people, they lied about him. He lived in the house of the minister, and all the things all the difficulty that he went through with those women and being lied about. Then he went to jail for at least 9 years, and difficulty that he went that. But he realized at the moment that it is my responsibility to help a nation and a people, regardless of them being disbelievers, regardless of them treating me badly. What a beautiful, beautiful ihsan of Yusuf. And he says right away, he disregards the fact that his friend had forgotten about him. He doesn't even make him feel guilty. And he says, let your king know that you will have 7 years of goodness and then 7 years of drought. And in those 7 years of goodness, water and harvest, and that you have to prepare for the 7 years that will come later. Try to eat eat the least that you can, and try to store the most that you can. And Yusuf even adds to the interpretation of the dream that the 15th year will be a year, goodness will come back after the 7 years of it. There'll be a year of rain and growth and abundance, right? And so Yusuf, at that point, he realizes the difference, and he defines for us the difference between, I'm going to introduce some, I don't know if we've used these words before, a salih and a muslih. What's the difference? The difference between being salih and muslih. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Very good. Yusuf knows, and he teaches us that regardless of these people and what they've done to me, it is my responsibility to be, as a believer in one God, as a prophet, as a da'i to the path of La ilaha illallah Rasulullah, as a khalifa on this earth. It is my responsibility. I cannot just be a Muslim. I cannot just be a worshiper and be good in my own realm. I have the next level, and is mandatory, is to be a salih. If I see something around me that needs to be fixed, I have to fix it. I have to make sure to try to help those around me, right? I don't judge them, but I help them. And this is exactly what Yusuf does. He says, this is the situation that you're going to be in, and this is what, and he gives them the solution. The grain will actually stay, it won't go bad. It will stay fresh quicker if you keep it in its, you don't pluck the grain from the stalk and save it like that, and only eat this much. So subhanAllah, Yusuf defines for us at this point really just the importance of being a salih, the importance of being somebody who gives back to the society, regardless of that society. He could have just said, he could have found, like you said, his card out of jail and see you guys later. I'm going to go back out and try to find my way in this world. But he said, I have to, and we're going to read these ayat next time, I have to find a way to make sure that I'm part of saving this country and this civilization, that they are prepared for the 7 years of drought and famine. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me knowledge and ability, and it says that Prophet Yusuf understood how to keep grain fresh for longer, he understood how to harvest best, he understood how to store things. Allah alam, where he learned this, he could have actually learned it in his first 10 years of life with his brothers, and they were Badu, right? They had land and they had livestock, and he could have learned that from when he was young. He saw them do that. We don't, but he knew how to do this, and so he tells his friend in jail, this is the interpretation of your dream, and this is what you should do to make sure that this does not happen to the Egyptian civilization for that those 7 years are not as bad as they can be, right? SubhanAllah. So this is Yusuf's interpretation of the dream. Okay. So then his friend goes back to the jail, goes back to the king, and he tells the king that I found out the interpretation of your dream. I know what your dream means. This is what it means. This is what we have to do. And the king says, where'd you get this from? Like, who told you this? This is amazing. And he says, well, I had a friend in jail he was a good guy, and he could interpret dreams. He interpreted he explains it to him. And so the king says, bring him to me. What is Yusuf's first reaction when the king says, bring that man to me? What's his first reaction? And he says to him, go back to your king and bring up the case of these women who cut their hands and bring up my case. What's he trying to do, Yusuf? Clear his name, show his innocence, right? That I'm not going to come out of this jail and I'm not going to step foot into society until it is shown that I am innocent. That the reason why I spent all these years in jail was that I did nothing wrong, that I did nothing that was not dignified, that I did nothing that was not proper, right? And so this again is a great quality, protecting and you're honoring your reputation, making sure to take care of your reputation, making sure that the others around you, you don't do anything wrong, so nobody else has a reason to say anything bad about you or destroy your reputation. And if anybody does, then you have to fight for your reputation, maintain your reputation, because it's important as a believer temporary interpretation of being somebody who has ihsan, right? Who's a good person. So that's basically what happens. They bring in the lady, the wife of the Aziz, they bring her in. It's been many years. I'm sure she's kind of been thinking about, well, I'm not sure, but I would guess that how I threw this young man in jail. You know, she must have some sort of guilt. And she finally says, yes, it's true that Yusuf, it was not his fault. It was my doing and the doings of my friends. And he should not have spent all of these years in jail. But subhanAllah, Yusuf doesn't ever allow these difficulties in his life to slow him down. You know, others may have gone into a depression. And what if I hadn't wasted those 7 years? Where could I be now? And who could I have become? And that's not fair. And how dare they do this to me? And I'm going to go, and you know, I'm not going to help them because they took away my years of youth and I was in this jail. You never look at your situations like in a negative. Look at them in a positive. There was a reason why I spent these years in this. There was a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting me through this test. How much blessings or how much reward did Yusuf get for doing da'wah in jail? How many people he could have affected their lives and changed them? So think about every situation that you're in, not in a negative way. Why am I here? Why? Astaghfirullah. We should never say, why is Allah doing this to me? What? You should say, there is a reason why, and there is a hikmah why. There is wisdom in why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in this space. However tight, however difficult, however I think it's bad, it actually can be good for me. And this time in jail actually turned out to be good for Yusuf because it made him find his way into the parliament and the court. And he became the one responsible for all of the economics and the money of Egypt. This young boy, he was thrown in a well by his brothers. People would think he had no future. He served like a slave, right? And was treated so in such a bad way by the wife of the Aziz, and he spent 9 years in jail. You'd think that this trauma, like we talk about PTSD, and that he must have got, but look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what kind of faith he had in his heart, and what kind of person he became. These tests for yours do not define who you are, should not define you where you are, should not let you think that you cannot continue to dream to be something great. Just because you're in a difficult time, just because things are tight for you, just because you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, doesn't mean that Allah doesn't have something great for you. Allah's just testing you right now. Allah's seeing how patient you will be, how you're going to deal with these tests, how you're going to make the best of them, how you're going to find a way to get reward out of this difficult time, right? And you can still become and achieve that dream of yours, that legacy of yours, that purpose of yours that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined for each and every one of us. So this is, again, the repetitive theme that we learn from Yusuf. To maintain your ihsan, to maintain your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to know that all of these things are just hurdles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing you with, because eventually you have something greater at the end that Allah has written for you, inshallah. Right? So this is the part of the story that we learn from Yusuf's time in the jail and how he gets out of jail. Anybody have any questions for me or any additions? Did I miss anything? Oh, okay. So the dream itself is mentioned, the interpretation is mentioned by Yusuf to his friend, and then it's repeated again in the ayat from the friend to the king. Why? That's a good question, actually. I'm sure there is that. We said that every single word, every single letter, there's a purpose, there's a reason why it's in the Quran. So the reason why that it was repeated twice. Actually, to be honest with you, when I was reading the tafsir of this part of the surah, I had to read it more than once because it's kind of confusing. Like how many years and what happened? Like, is it the fat cow and the skinny cow? Is it simultaneous with the good grain and the bad grain, or are they, So it could be just because it's a complicated kind of dream that has many parts to it. That the interpretation has to be repeated twice. Wallahu a'lam. But that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you. If anybody else has an idea of why maybe the dream was mentioned more than once. Because you're right, like Yusuf's dream was mentioned only once, right? And the dreams of the two cellmates were mentioned only once, kind of. But or the dream and that, but this was explained more than once. The king's dream. Well, Allah, Anas. Mm-hmm. How dreams work in Islam. So dreams is a whole different. There's a science of hadith of dreams, and I don't really want to go there because it's not my expertise, and I don't want to, But what we know in general when we talk about dreams is when you see a good dream, know inshallah, and mostly if it's just before Fajr, if you wake up for Fajr regularly and you have a good dream and then you wake up, it's Fajr time, but this is a good sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can have good dreams and dreams of like that something good is going to happen to you, make you feel good, even to those who are not prophets. Regular people can see dreams as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing that we know about dreams is that if you see a dream that is disturbing to you or is scary or something, try not to share it. Try to forget it. And if you're in the middle of that dream, try to wake yourself up and get out of bed, make wudu, say istighfar. If you have enough energy, make 2 rak'ahs, but at least, wash yourself off and say some adhkar and try to go back to bed. Okay? Try to sleep on your right-hand side to prevent those bad dreams from coming again. Usually, bad dreams that come to you after Fajr are considered just from the shaitan playing around with you, mostly if you haven't prayed Fajr on time. So be aware of that. And these are just some kind of things that we know about dreams. People can see the Prophet Muhammad in their dream. People can see loved ones in their dreams. And so if it's a good dream, you can share it with others, and you can know that it's something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you and He's giving you a good sign. If it's a bad dream, try to keep it to yourself. That's it. Yeah, mashallah. So that's a good way to put that. If it's a bad dream, like maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from His mercy wants to like wake you up and say, you need to stop doing what you're doing and change your ways. Yeah. And if you have if there are people in our community, there are some ulama and shuyukh that can interpret dreams and tell you more about dreams. If you really have a dream that comes over and over and just presses in your mind and you need to know what it means, find somebody that has knowledge in that. Don't make it public. Nah. Mm-hmm. Is the king already sure about it? To confirm it. I really don't know, subhanAllah, if the king is kind of almost calling them as witnesses and asking them about the story or telling them or is he sure about Yusuf's innocence? But the Yusuf's innocence needs to be professed in public. And maybe that could be the reason why the king asked them, tell the truth, what is the truth? And they said, this is the truth. What was in the king's heart or what the king already knew in his mind, we don't know. He may have already believed in Yusuf's innocence just because he had heard good things about Yusuf, about how he carried himself in the jail, that he was a dream interpreter. That usually meant that people who could interpret dreams were good people. But the profession of Yusuf's innocence had to be made publicly, and that's why the question had to be asked publicly and the answer had to be given publicly. Yeah, these kind of things were kind of like swept under the rug, right? And Yusuf said, this is not going to be swept into the rug anymore. They have to say clear cut that I am innocent. And Yusuf knew that eventually he's going to have a position in society. And so he had to make sure that his name was cleared. People could never say that that guy who did this stuff, now look, he's like, in charge of this, or he has a position, he is completely innocent, so that those who he dealt with in the court and in the parliament trust him and respect him. So his name has to be cleared for that reason also, right? That's it. Anybody else have anything to add? Jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah, I'll see you guys on Sunday. Inshallah, subhanaka wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Inshallah, Isha is in 10 minutes.